Hey everyone, welcome to part 4 of my tutorial series on React, Redux, and Webpack. In this video, we are going to learn how to include hot module reloading into your project. This is a functionality of Webpack that allows us to see changes in our components, React components, immediately in the browser without having to rebuild Webpack, without having to use Webpack to rebuild our app every time. It's awesome. Before we start, I want to give a quick refresher on this whole GitHub thing. So right now, as you can see, I'm on the branch part 4 start of the GitHub repo React to-do list. This repo can be found at kyworth/react-to-do-list. And I'll be adding branches as I create them. Now, if you're watching a video, if you pull down this code and then I add branches, so I add videos after you've looked at this, what you can do is you can take the link for this repo and you can add a remote to your local Git repo. I suggest, in general, forking my repo and cloning it down, but then if new content gets added, you need to be able to pull that down. So you can git remote add a remote called upstream, and then you would insert that URL that I just showed you from my repo, and then you can do things like git pull upstream part X start. So whatever part you don't have locally but that I've pushed up since, you can then get it. So you want to make sure you do a git branch part 4 start. Sorry. Yeah, you want to check out the branch. Git checkout part 4 start. Make sure you're where you need to be. I'm already on it. So really briefly, before we get into hot module reloading, I want to go back to something I was having problems with at the end of part 3, my last video. I was getting an error that looked like, let's see if it's still up. Yeah, it looked like this. So it's this, I couldn't really figure it out. It was a warning from React. I looked it up a little bit. It seems like it generally happens when there's a problem importing a component. So it had something to do with maybe the export of this app. I changed the ES6 class syntax to just be var app equals react.createClass, and it worked. I don't know why it wasn't working. Here's my import statement. It looked fine. You're importing it here. You're using it here in the JSX syntax. Honestly, I made some changes, and then I kind of Command Z'd and undid those changes, and it's working now. Let's see, Webpack, let's make sure it's working. We give it a config file, webpack.config.js. Builds it, serve, refresh. We've got a React app going. So, cool. I don't know exactly what went wrong, but thought you could clear it. Anyway, moving on. So as you can see, it's kind of a pain to have to run your Webpack to build it and then restart your server. I told you our last video that we have Nodamon working, so when we do run serve, Nodamon is monitoring any changes and going to restart, but when we make changes to components, just restarting the server isn't going to help because these components need to be built into bundle.js. And so by restarting the server, it's still going to be using the same bundle.js file. So one way to do this is to use Webpack as a middleware in your server, and Webpack will kind of hook into your server. So we'll do something like, and this is pseudocode, we'll do something like app.use Webpack in development mode. And then when you go to your site, when you go to localhost 3000, the Webpack will actually be hooked into your server and will actually be serving your file. So it won't actually make a bundle.js, it'll kind of mimic a bundle.js. What that does is it allows us to use a plugin called hot module reloading. And what this means is that Webpack can keep track of your files and the bundle. And so if anything changes in your files, it will make that change immediately in the bundle, or the pseudo bundle that it's keeping track of here for us as like a middleware. And then what that means is any change you make will show up immediately in the browser. It's really cool. So there's a few things we need to do to set this up. One that I'm thinking off the top of my head is that right now, Notamon, if we look at its output here, Notamon is watching any file in this root folder. But when a component changes, we don't want to restart the server. We just want to do the Webpack development hot module reloading thing. So one thing we can do to this serve script is we can ignore components. So we're ignoring the folder called components. Excuse me. What this means is that Notamon will not restart the server when something changes in the component. So let's see if this is true. Let's get this over here. Let's get this over here. Let's make a change. Well, let's npm run serve with the new code. Let's see if making a change, let's add an exclamation point here, and let's hit save. Cool. Nothing happens. That's good. Let's make a change to server. Let's put it onto port. I don't know if that'll screw things up. Oh, let's see what happens. Port 3001. Save. As you can see, it restarted the server on port 3001. So Notamon is still monitoring for changes, restarting the server when it needs to, but not doing it for components, which is great, which is what we want. Let's change this back, save it. Hey, we're back on 3000. Cool. Let's go back here. Let's remove this exclamation point, save it. Nothing happened. Still cool. Okay, so that's great. Now, how does Webpack know how to do hot module reloading? Well, one thing that it needs is as it's going through the code, let's full screen this crap again. As it's going through the code for any JavaScript file, it's performing React transformations, ES6 transformations, and one thing it also needs to do is kind of do hot module reloading transformations. It needs to add some code so that it can keep track of these things under the hood. We don't worry about what it's doing, or at least I don't, so I cannot tell you exactly how this works. But what I do know is we need to add something here. We need to add a hot module reloading preset. And there are separate plugins you can use, but it's super easy to use the preset. Let's go on and look up what that is. So I apologize. I was saying this is kind of a Webpack thing. It's really more of a Babel plugin or preset, you could say. But so I apologize in advance for me confusing Webpack and Babel. They are similar in that they work really closely together, but they are separate libraries. Babel is more of the compiler and the actual changing of code, and Webpack is more of the whole configuration and the build process of doing Babel transformations. So we have this preset called React HMRE. It's for hot module reloading, and it adds this erroring handler, which is a separate plugin. But I believe it just makes your errors maybe more specific, or yeah, I'm actually not sure what it does. So anyway, let's just use it. We want to save this. we want to install it and save it into our project. Let's make sure it went into our package.json, and it did. And so this react-hmre is a preset that we would like to add here. Put it in quotes, of course. Cool. So we've now added the ability to hot module reload. There are some other, I'm going to cheat now from one of my old projects. There are some other plugins that we should definitely use with Webpack that I didn't include before because I wanted to keep it a little bit simpler. Yeah, so Webpack allows us to define plugins. These are Webpack plugins, not Babel, right? I should have known that before because we're in Babel loader and we're giving Babel its query. These are Webpack plugins. So let's first import Webpack. Locally. This is why we need to have Webpack here installed locally into our project folder. Let's head back to our config file. So we can we create a new Webpack. A Webpack has a bunch of plugins. One of them is called Optimize Occurrence Order plugin. This has to do with when it goes through each import or require statement, it gives them IDs, it has hash IDs, and somehow this optimizes the order that it does it in, or maybe it optimizes, makes it more efficient if it needs to reuse certain modules. I'm not actually entirely sure. So if you know, please leave a comment and teach me. The other thing we need for hot module reloading is the hot module replacement plugin. This allows us to kind of plug in, have a plugin that allows any changes to be replaced hot modularly, if that's a word. And then there's another one that we should have also called No Errors plugin. And what this does is it won't allow Webpack to finish the build if there's an error, if it encounters an error. I believe that can be a syntax error or just maybe a wrong import statement or something like that. It'll stop until you fix it, you save it, save that fix, and then it'll keep on building. So that's that. And I said that the hot module replacement needs to be kind of a middleware in your server or within your server. And so let's set that up next. So let's go into the server file. And I said here with pseudocode that it's going to be kind of like a middleware. And that's actually very much what it is. Let me pull up the code so I don't get it wrong. One second. Cool. So to do this, we need to, if you recall, we were calling Webpack with this --config Webpack, but we aren't going to be calling Webpack from the command line anymore. We're going to be kind of inserting it into our server. So we need to import the config file to be used to config the Webpack that we're going to be including in our server. So here we go out. We need a path to the config file. It's up one folder. and then it's webpack.config.js. We need to include Webpack, which again is installed locally. And then we need a couple other libraries. So Webpack has kind of already made some of these middlewares that we need to include in our server. So the one is called Webpack Dev middleware. And the other one is called Webpack Hot middleware. So the dev allows us to hook into an Express app, and the hot middleware lets us do some hot module reloading. So here's where we're actually going to include it into our Express app. I call a variable called compiler. This is basically just making the Webpack object, and the Webpack takes in the configuration which we imported here into this variable config. So now we have this compiler which we can then hand off to those middlewares, the dev and the hot. So we want to do an app.use Webpack dev middleware we start with. We pass it in the compiler, and then we pass it in some parameters. No info, true just means that we don't want to see every output that Webpack is doing. If you turn it off, you might get some more information. It might be a good learning experience, but it kind of clutters up your console. And then public path, this is what the dev kind of simulates as your path. So if you recall, in our config, we gave it a public path. And if you'll recall, I was a little bit non-specific on what this means because I'm actually not entirely sure how this all works. But what it means is that we're using the root here. So in our index, when we call bundle, we're doing it to the root. It would be the same like that. And so this is where Webpack, oops, I'm sorry about that. The public path is where Webpack simulates your public path to get that bundle.js. As I mentioned earlier, the point of having Webpack as a middleware is that it can do hot module reloading and kind of simulates having your bundle.js, but doesn't actually create a bundle.js in your dist folder. Instead, it simulates it. So the public path is what path it's going to intercept traffic to. So when your index.html calls for bundle.js, it's going to serve up its special bundle.js, the hot module reloading capable bundle.js. So we can just use from the config.output.public path because we already defined that. So no need to define it again. And then secondly, we're going to do a little Webpack hot middleware, pass it in the compiler, and that's easy, that's done. Let's get rid of this comment here. I imported these, but I never actually installed them into my project, so we need to do that. So let's do npm install save Webpack dev middleware Webpack hot middleware. Okay, so let's review very quickly. We have middleware that is dev and hot middleware that is hooked up to our Express app. When we run the app through our npm run serve, we're going to be starting the server, which is going to have the Webpack middleware. The Webpack middleware knows about our config because we created this compiler and gave it the config. So the Webpack knows to use an inline source map, which I talked briefly about last video. It knows where to enter, and we have the hot module replacement plugin, and we have the Babel preset that allows this to talk to the hot module aspect of Webpack. Now, there's one thing that needs to be added here, and to be honest, I don't quite understand what it is, but we need to add another entry. So this is our entry for when we're just compiling our app and making a bundle for the first time. But I believe Webpack needs to know about where to look again for the new or the current code when there's a change. It needs to know a new entry point. So it's at webpack-hot-middleware/client. And again, to be honest, I think it's because I'm not even sure if it's because I've called this folder client. I just know this was in a bunch of the examples, so I apologize for not really knowing what this is about, but you definitely need it. So you should put it in. Cool, save that. So with all this in place, I believe this should work. Fingers crossed, we'll see. Kind of winging this right now. Once you set this up, you don't really touch it that often. Once you set up your development environment, you just, you start coding and things start changing automatically in the browser, and it kind of seems like magic, but there is that initial setup. So let's run our server. Okay, that all looked good. And no, it didn't. It crashed. Let's see. So we have an error here. So the error is in our Webpack dev middleware. It's in line 105. Let's make sure I've saved everything. Everything does look saved. If we go into Webpack dev middleware, go into the middleware in line 105. So it has something to do with actually starting to watch the files. So it looks like, let's make sure we got this right. This is the config, up one folder, webpack.config.js. That looks good. No info, true. Config.output.public path, is that correct? This is config.output.public path. That looks pretty good. See, file name. We've got the React hot module reloading preset on the Babel. Let's get rid of this bundle.js. That's where we're actually building. That's more of like a production build, right? We want Webpack to do it and kind of latch in itself. We're getting the same error though. See if this helps us at all. Let's do a little troubleshooting. So what I'm seeing here is that potentially this relative path gets a little screwed up when Webpack tries to hook in. And in my output, I have a relative path. So let's see what they mention here. Should be require path. So this is a standard node module path. Let's try this resolve. Let's try it. So they're resolving to a folder called build/js. We would be resolving to a folder called dist. So we can use the same relative thing here, but we're allowing path to resolve it, meaning wherever. So what could be the issue is that it could be that Webpack kept trying to find dist relative to wherever it is, wherever the dev middleware is, but it couldn't do it. What this does is this require path.resolve gives it an absolute path. So when this gets run and configured in the server.js, the path will resolve the dist folder, which when it's being when this file is being run is the correct relative path, and it will go in and resolve the absolute path, which might help Webpack, but we'll see. Oh, look at that. So changed the file. The Express server restarted because NodeMon is listening for changes in files. It restarted, and then we see that Webpack successfully built. Here's the ID of its build in about 3 seconds. So let's go back to our code. And there it is. So let's try and see if our hot module reloading is working. Let's head to app.js. Remember, this is a component. And I said if we make any changes, it should appear immediately once you save the file. So I'm adding a few words here to this sentence. I'm going to hit Command S to save it, and we'll see if it updates. So I'm hitting Command S right now. Boom, there it is. No need to refresh, no need to rebuild, no need to restart your server. So if we head over here, we look at our output in our console, we see that hot module reloading is connected. We hit save, it rebuilds, and then, yeah, patching the app, and it updated the modules that we changed, and boom, app is up to date. So that is how to set up Webpack hot module reloading in a development environment. Obviously, we don't want this in production. You won't be changing code in production. And in fact, in production, the only thing you want is you want a bundle.js file in dist. You don't want Webpack being a middleware in your server, and you don't want to include the hot module reloading, or there's no reason to, and there's no reason to include some of these plugins here. No reason to include this entry here. So a lot of these things are development environment specific, and in a future video, not the next one, I think the next one we'll get into building some, parent-child components, seeing state, seeing props. We'll look at that, but in a future video, I'm definitely going to show you how to set up a development environment for Webpack and a production environment for Webpack. It's not too hard, and it'll make your life really easy in development and make an actual app be able to be in production as well. Thanks for listening to part 4. Hope to see you back for part 5.